Good morning. I want to encourage you to reflect today. Use reflection and investigation more if that feels like the right step. So I think you all have experience with establishing mindfulness and using mindfulness. Any way that you use the 4 foundations of mindfulness is fine, within the range of what the suttas describe, what the Buddha described, which is quite a lot of variation. You know, establishing mindfulness, being mindful of the body, whether it's the elements or the parts of the body. Could use something like Bhante Analayo's approach of scanning the body from the soles of the feet up and down from the crown of the head, with simply the skin, and then the next pass the flesh, and the next pass the bones, things like that. Or you can just use mindfulness of in and out breathing. And of course the other foundations of mindfulness are also covered by mindfulness of in and out breathing, but you can use, whatever method you like to observe feeling and mental states and Dhamma. And I want to put the focus today on investigation of Dhamma. So usually it's good to become as calm as your mind and body will allow. And then this investigation can be done in various ways. Probably the most available is just being present and aware with what's happening right now. In the present moment, what is the mental state? Are there hindrances? Whatever is arising, to investigate that. And what does it mean to investigate? It's really, first of all, observing and knowing what you're observing. So if there's restlessness, you're aware of the restlessness. You can investigate, where that might be coming from, or you can have a question in the mind that you just let hang there. When I say that, what I mean is a question that you don't try to answer. This is not about thinking. So that's one important thing to realize. This investigation of Dhamma is not a thinking mind activity. It's about being bright and present and aware of what's happening, and then bringing in an aspect of Dhamma that helps you to understand or to address what's going on. For example, we did have a question yesterday, and we can use this as an example. So first of all, there is a statement here about the Buddha in the Maggandhya Sutta, talking about how intentional sensual gratification is like a leper who cauterizes his wounds with fire. So I don't know how many of you have seen this simile, but the Buddha talked about how someone with leprosy, when they are held over the fire, it gives some relief. And he said, but if that person were healed, and then they tried to take him to hold him by the fire, he would really fight to not have that happen, because if you don't have that ailment, you would never want your skin to be burnt like that. And so I think you can get the sense. And the Buddha said this is like the way we indulge in sensual pleasures. You know, we're into it, but we're actually harming ourselves by it. And when we realize the true nature of reality, there's no way that we would want to engage in that anymore. And it's not the mild pleasures of, you know, what's happening in the forest, but those things that really bring a lot of suffering, like engaging in sexual misconduct or, you know, other things that cause us to break the precepts perhaps, or just that belief that it's so great to have a sensual experience when actually it just leads to more craving. So sometimes people think, well, I need to, like, even if I see a beautiful flower or the dew on a spider web or whatever it is, that I can't really like take that as beautiful because it's really impermanent and blah, blah, blah. And that's just following a kind of ideal without understanding the issue, without really knowing. So it's not like an enlightened being doesn't see beauty and ugliness, but they can also see ugliness within beauty and beauty within ugliness. They can also see the impermanent nature of things. It's a knowing and observing without attachment. But when you see something and you know the true nature of it, you don't get pulled by it. It's not like you have this intense, you don't have the craving or the clinging. Okay, so that was the first kind of putting this question in context. So there's been some experience here of non-sensual joy, so spiritual joy, which you also can probably relate to. But it hasn't caused a weakening of wanting the sensual joy. And it seems unfathomable to live a life free of that sensual longing and grasping. But the suttas, the teachings, indicate a freedom from this clinging, grasping, desiring as blissful. Yes. So, how does this work with investigation? So when we're meditating, it can happen when we're not meditating also. When we're observing with mindfulness, because this should be all the time, not just when you're, sitting in meditation or doing walking meditation, but all the time we can be present and aware with what we're experiencing. Our feelings, our mental states, our desires. And if whatever is arising, if we're looking at that, and let's say this kind of desire for some kind of sensual gratification comes up, then to be present and aware of it means that our mindfulness is engaged and we're not consumed by this feeling. no matter how strong it is. Instead, we're able to observe this feeling. So when I said the other day that it's like it's an object to you, it's like it's a little bit distant from you, you're watching it, whatever it is. Fear, anxiety, the darkness of depression, whatever it is, we can observe it, and you can recognize that it's an object, not me, not mine, not the whole screen of our experience. It's like stepping back a little bit and seeing it, or sometimes I think of it as like standing on the edge of the fire, like that's happening there. I'm at the edge, I'm observing it, but that right now I'm referring to kind of colloquially, if anything, as me, or conventionally as me observing. That part that's observing is not caught up in that desire, aversion, or whatever. So this is the function of mindfulness. And then we have the Sambojjhaṅga, the wisdom that comes with it. And we're able to recognize what this is, that it's this sensual desire or whatever. And we're able to be present with it. We're able to feel how it feels. That's how it feels. But it's again, like this position of observing isn't caught up in that feeling. You can even be crying your eyes out over something, and that function of the mind that's observing can have a thought of, maybe it would be a good idea to have something to drink or have some food. And that could help this maybe feeling of gut-wrenching agony. And this works at the same time. It's like there's that observation, that clear-headed, wise attention happening as this kind of conditioned mess is unfolding. And you can just be present with that. And it keeps changing. So investigation, in part, is just that observation. It's just like, Sherlock Holmes trying to figure out some mystery thing happening. You've got these clues, and you've got this experience, and then you can ask questions about it. And it's not the thinking mind, it's the intuitive sense that you're connected with. So a question about this desire could be something like, and if this desire were met, how would I feel? Would I feel satisfied and completely happy? How long would it last? The Buddha asked this series of questions in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the Sutta on non-self, asking about, is the body permanent or impermanent? And the answer, but you don't answer from an intellectual place. The answer needs to come from the depth of our wisdom. And then is it dukkha or sukha, suffering or happiness, when something's impermanent? And you're probably very familiar with these questions. And then if something's impermanent and dukkha, is it self or not self? Okay, on an intellectual level, that might make a lot of sense, or maybe it doesn't make sense. You can believe it or you cannot believe it, but none of that matters. What matters is when you investigate and bring a question like that to your mind, you sense it from deep within. You let that answer come up intuitively. The thinking mind might have an answer right away, but you don't accept that answer. It's like, even if of course it's impermanent, it's still on this superficial level. We don't have it it's not touching the gut intuition level. So investigation of Dhamma requires that opening. If we're really if insight's gonna arise, it arises from that depth. And to be open to the answers, especially to the questions we don't have an answer for. We see in the suttas, like, how can being without sensual gratification be blissful? What is the reality of that? And then, we may not understand anything more the first time we try this, or however many times, right? But to be willing to open up to what we've never seen or known before is really the process that makes it possible to invite insight. That's an invitation to insight. And we also, I feel, for myself, I had this strong commitment and openness to hear, learn anything, no matter how it disrupted my life, no matter how much it would change my idea of the way things are. Because we are walking around in this world in a shroud of ignorance, and we think we have all of this understanding of things, but if we're not willing to let go of that, maybe we won't see, we don't open the opportunity to see the truth. If we're suffering, we're still dealing with ignorance, we're still dealing with confusion, delusion. So we want to, I recommend asking yourself, and this is another point of investigation, don't just do it because I say something, figure it out. See, no, that's not the right words. Not with the thinking mind, but inquire for yourself. Can I let go of what I think so far, my opinions and my views, my perceptions based on my conditioning? Can I let that go? Can I be open to something completely different that comes from basically the ground of Dhamma? When we're dealing with strong feelings, aversion and desire, then we really need to have a lot of patience and endurance to stay with those strong feelings until they die down, until they disappear on their own. And many of you have heard me say this frequently, and I hope that you're having some experiences like this, because that's what we really need in order to develop the confidence and the courage, maybe it's courage, I don't know, to stay present with whatever arises without getting sucked into it, without going along with it, without giving in. So maybe there's something that's not so intense, but it's chronic, like restlessness. Restlessness is really part of human existence. This is a restless realm. This form of this human body and mind, this is a restless kind of form. The human and animal world is full of restlessness. And so it takes some real mindfulness and persistence to work with restlessness. But we can recognize and experience times when that restlessness subsides. And we can stay in that space that is peaceful and sublime. Now sometimes, because we're so conditioned to be restless, we can't stand the peace and sublime, peaceful, sublime space. We want to do something. And that's more restlessness. So we want to observe that and just calm that part. Say, no. Like staying present with what's peaceful, the letting go. And train ourselves in that way to love it. I mean, sometimes insight arises and there's so much joy that you know that you can't go back to the same kind of enamored attitude towards sensual desire. But until that happens, we want to really encourage ourselves to stay present and observe and come back to feelings, experience of tranquility and happiness on a spiritual level. And part of what helps us do that is the reminder of dukkha. When we ask that question, how will I feel if I get what I want? It's important to recognize the way your own mind has been conditioned. Has it been conditioned to ignore the dukkha? Has it been conditioned to just thrive on the intensity of certain kinds of pleasure and just want more and more? That's an addiction, because it doesn't, if we try to ignore the dukkha, then we are caught up in that vicious cycle of continuing to want more without really being satisfied. So if we can really open up to the full experience and allow ourselves to listen. Maybe that's a better way to think of this, really listening to our mind, listening to our feelings, being patient and present, and then from time to time dropping in a question You can't really answer with a thinking mind. And waiting.